Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, starting a new project. This time we have a Harpoon AGM, which is it's at least an actual missile in the American arsenal here. I'm not entirely sure that this is a scale model, but we will find out at some point. It does generally look like the picture on the box, the real one. But this one is a little different from previous things that we've built because this is not manufactured by our good friends at Estes, nor is it a Rocketarium kit. This one is manufactured by Quest, which is a very long named or long historied franchise making rocketry parts. I've always kind of thought of it as like Estes' little brother, but in any event, they have a long heritage, so that's good stuff. Now they seem to be in a partnership, or at least they're owned by another rocketry company that makes motors more than anything else. That's their main reputation. And here's actually one of the motors that Aerotech manufactures. This is not like the gunpowder motors that Estes makes. This one is made and filled with composite fuel. So these are more powerful because composite fuel has more energy density, and it's got a better specific impulse for those of you who are interested in rocketry, that kind of thing. So this is a 18 millimeter motor. It's the same size as a typical Estes kit, but you'll notice it's D. So this thing packed full gets an extra, it's not quite 50%, but significantly more energy than a comparable gunpowder model. They are harder to use, like significantly harder to use because they don't catch as easily. But there are definite benefits to using them. So the one company that I like to buy kits from and motors from apparently started carrying Quest and um, Aerotech motors. So I decided to pick this one up because I think it looks nice and, give it a try. So I've already done a little bit of work, so you don't need to watch that. I've cut the fins out, I've sanded and taken care of the fins. There are a couple things I've noticed in this kit so far that I'm not super pleased with. One is the directions, at least the picture quality is definitely not up to what I'm used to. So for comparison's sake, this is even an old Estes one from 20 years ago, and you can see that the image is better. Uh, this looks like not a particularly good photocopy, frankly. So grayscale and stuff like that. However, the language in the instructions is pretty well written overall, so we'll be fine with that. The other thing that I've noticed that I'm not super keen on is there were two bits of balsa stock here that the fins came out of when I cut them. One was pretty nice and it was laser cut. The other, so that's the scrap, the other one was die cut, as far as I could tell, because there weren't any burn marks on it. And you can notice here, the end of the stock was really ragged. And the stock itself was kind of, where the fins were cut out was a little dodgy looking too. So hopefully that won't have any real bearing on anything, but you can tell the difference. This is the laser cut balsa stock, looks pretty nice. This is the other balsa stock, and it doesn't look as nice even after I prepped it. So whatever, that's fine. We will start our work here, and the first thing that we need to do in the instructions is, well, we need to get all this stuff out first of all. So there we go. We have a motor mount to build, and all the shock stuff is kind of packed up inside of the tube here. I'm kind of leery about this because yellow tube, usually, this is an Estes one, this is the rammer, and they look pretty similar. So I'm gonna have to be careful with that. One nice thing I've noticed here is that there is a little cut made in here where typically the engine hook would go. However, that's not going to be the case for this. So I've read ahead in the instructions a little bit. Anyway, the first thing we need to do, this kit, like our Rocketarium Trident, is going to use both the Kevlar thread and elastic for a shock cord, which is nice. And the Kevlar then is going to be attached deep inside the motor mount for extra strength. So the first thing we need to do is it says, have the ends even here. And then we need to tie a knot in this, keeping the ends as close to being even as possible. And this is how the two um, shock cords are going to couple together. And unfortunately, I've kind of messed up the edges, but that's okay. And now they are together. It wants approximately an inch between the end of the elastic and the end of the Kevlar, and they are one's elastic and one's not, so that seems to be good. I'm just going to pull them individually to see that they seem to be intact. So that looks pretty good. And it now says to apply a little bit of glue. That's always a good idea. I don't think I need crazy glue. We'll just go with the regular kind. It says white glue. But, sometimes it wouldn't hurt to have crazy glue, but I don't think that's necessary in this case. We're just trying to encourage the knot to not wander off. And getting a little bit of glue in there should help. All right, so I'll let that dry, preferably with the glue not drying to anything else, and we'll put that up out of the way. All right, next, going into the instructions, we are going to start construction of the actual motor mount. So we need this, we're going to need these centering rings, we're going to need the engine hook, the launch lug we will get out of the way. So the first thing it says is that we are going to use a hobby knife and the little blue thrust ring, and we are going to chop a little shallow V into the thrust ring. So the reason for this is because we're going to thread the Kevlar thread through there, and so that's fine. I think, and I just want to be careful I don't cut the whole way through this. So I'm going to cut vertically, partially so you can see, but also I don't want to really be cutting toward myself. And I feel like that is what would happen if I were to try to cut this not vertically. Okay, so I've taken a decent chunk out here. I need to clean this up a little bit. And that's probably good enough. We don't need to chop the whole way through. We're just trying to get it so that the Kevlar thread, which is quite thin, will fit inside of that. And this is actually, so it says, we want to tie the shock cord around the thrust ring, and then that's going to get put inside of the motor mount. So the glue, of course, has not fully dried on my construction over here, but it's good. It's not perfect, but it's fine. So it says then we are going to, all right, I'm going to at least check this way to make sure that this fits. We don't have like the thread sticking way out, and looks all right. I think I should probably clean this up a little bit, and I'm going to just carefully kind of chop in like so. I'm going to be very careful not to get my fingers in the way now. Yeah, I had a little bit of cardboard that hadn't been cut the whole way through in the middle, and I think that's why the Kevlar didn't lay as flat as it could. And that is fine. All right, so it says test fit the blue thrust ring into the motor mount. That shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, and that's no problem whatsoever. And then we are going to tie the Kevlar cord around the blue thrust ring using 2 overhand knots. No problem. Just going to kind of loop it through here. Eventually I don't want the Kevlar to be like really, really far into this, but we'll at least get it started so it's easy to work with, and then we can kind of adjust it down as necessary. And I, of course, do want it to be in that groove, because otherwise, what was the point of all this? All right. Now, of course, in doing so, I have made the thrust string a little wider, but it still looks like it fits pretty decently. What I am going to do though is I'm going to trim the excess off here, not the whole way, but a decent amount of the way. And Kevlar thread can be difficult to cut with scissors because it's tough. That's kind of the point. I just don't really want it to be super frayed after I cut it. Right, that is not cooperating, so let's try cutting it with a hobby knife. There. All right. That seems reasonably well attached at this point, but let's just pull on it, make sure. Ooh, am I not slipping? Yeah, we don't want that. The knot slipping would be a pretty major problem, because if the knot slips, the entire recovery system could go. So this is another one where we should probably put a little bit of glue on it just to make sure. And I think in this case, so this needs to fit like this, and it fits just fine. So there is going to be glue in there. I think I'm going to put a little bit of crazy glue on this after I get the motor mount set, which ironically is the next instruction. So it says apply white glue inside the inner edge of the tube. There's a notch on this side, so I suppose I'm going to put it in that way, but I don't, we're not actually going to use the notch, but I guess it doesn't hurt to, I don't want it near the end, where the motor is going to be. So it probably makes more sense to use the pre-notched end anyway. All right, so I'm going to use my dowel. I don't really want to get my fingers super gluey right now because I don't need a lot of glue in this phase of construction. So there we go. In goes the blue, and I need it to just be at the edge. That was actually, by pushing it down, I have defeated the purpose. So I need to kind of fish it back out. It's not hard with the wood glue, definitely not set yet. Okay. So in any event, with the knot facing as shown until it is even with the motor tube. So the knot is kind of one of the situations where I can't really see particularly well in the photocopy, but I'm happy with where it is, and I'm actually going to get the crazy glue now, and I'm going to put just a dot on the knot. There we go. A little bit will go a long way. All right, now I need to be careful not to glue myself to anything here either. All right, so the next bit we have our engine hook, and it says to make a slight bend in the motor clip. Okay, well, I can do that. And then it says to wrap, and I'm going to insert the clip into the yellow motor mount tube. So I'm going to try putting it into that slot. I don't know that it'll actually go because I'm pretty sure the engine block is there, which is indeed the case. Yeah. Well, we can just kind of push it in as best we can. Yeah, that is not going to go in because there's a big piece of motor mount in the way. Then it says that we need to get a piece of masking tape, and the masking tape is going to hold things in until after we get the centering rings online and in place. It wants to wiggle on me here. All right, so there we go. There's our tape. That's actually going to be a permanent feature, I guess, but yeah, it's not really going to be a structural element here. All right, so I need to be applying glue half an inch rather, from both ends to be then applying these rings. So dig out my ruler. Actually, I should point out too that if there's a nice thing in these instructions, it's that there is a built-in ruler here. And instead of having a big old template for the tube marking guide that takes up a lot of space, it's kind of in the margin here as well. So eventually I'm going to cut that out. but not right now. And I actually have a ruler, so I don't need to use the ruler that is built into the instructions. So here's my ruler, and I am going to measure 1/2 inch from this end, that's there, and I'm going to adjust it so that it's at an inch mark here, and make 1/2 inch mark from that end as well. So there we have it. As usual, I'm going to put the centering rings on before, and I think, yeah, I'm gonna do it like this. And this one, of course, because I have the shock cord going out, I'm going to have to thread it through, which is kind of annoying, but not a huge problem. And there's a not nice side to this and a nice side to these rings, but I can't begin to imagine why it would matter. So, yeah. And at this point too, I'm either going to have to cut a deeper slit in for the engine hook here, or I'm going to have to move it up to the edge, because I'm not going to be able to get the ring over it the way things are. So in looking more closely here at the instructions, I don't know. I mean, it looks like the instructions are telling me that the engine hook is just going to the edge and not actually in that little slit. So that's fine. We can do that. So I'm just going to slide it forward a little bit and then put the tape back down. And then just make sure, I have it just kind of coincidentally where the knot is. I don't want that. So I've adjusted it again, and that ought to do fine, I guess. All right, now that's taken care of. Let's thread this the rest of the way on. That's fine. I'm pushing both of these up to the tape so I can kind of walk the rings back once I get the glue on. So we'll start here, and I'm going to do my best to put the glue approximately in 1/2 inch in a ring. All right, and then we'll slide it forward into the glue. All right, and then I'm going to do my usual thing here and kind of smooth this glue out. We'll worry about getting the complete alignment, because remember, these centering rings should be at right angles to the engine mount. But I'm not going to worry about that just quite yet, because I'm probably going to bump it a decent amount as I fiddle with the other one. And the other one needs to be adjusted anyway, so might as well do them both at the same time. Okay, then sliding this one back down to the line I marked. It's about there. And that is way off. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't help but notice that one as I was starting to smooth out the glue here. All right, so the motor mount here is essentially in place. We want to, as usual, we should put a fillet of glue around the other sides that we didn't. This top side here in both directions is pretty good, because the glue kind of got pushed up into it when we slid the rings down, but the other sides definitely could stand a nice strong fillet, because remember, these have to withstand the force of the motor pushing on them. It's the main thing that the motor is going to be fighting against inside the body of the rocket, so we want this to be strong. And one thing also worth noting, of course, I mentioned that Quest, or Aerotech really, makes composite motors. Well, composite motors not only have more total thrust to them, that would be the 18 millimeter motor. The biggest you can get from Estes in a gunpowder driven motor is a C. The ones I showed you were Ds, so they are not only stronger with the total amount of thrust, but the maximum amount of thrust that they put out at any one given time is also higher. Those were D20s as opposed to the gunpowder motors, which are C6s. That number is essentially the maximum amount of thrust that you're going to get at any given moment, which is not quite accurate, but that is essentially what it is. So they put out, in this case, like almost 3 times as much peak thrust. So that is a problem, and we do need to make sure that our rocket can withstand that extra kick. Truthfully, though, I'm not entirely sure I'm ever going to fly one of these on a D composite motor. I'm going to be just happy flying it on a C gunpowder motor, and that should be fun. All right, so in any event, at this point, the next instruction is to mount and put this inside the body tube, and it needs to dry before that happens. And personally, I'd rather do all the markings on the tube before I put the motor in, and maybe even put the fins on before I do that. So I think at this point, uh, I'm going to stop here because this can dry. I do need to do a little bit of work on the fins here. I need to round them. I cut them out and process them a bit, but I didn't complete that work. So that needs to be done. And building this mount took a good amount of time. So this seems like a good place to stop for now. Thanks for watching, and we will pick it up with part 2 of our harpoon build at another time. See you then.